You're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM with your host Jimmy Petruzzi on the Friday Sports Show, bringing you all the news from the local area and around the world. And today we have a really fascinating guest. We're very fortunate on this show to get some really fascinating guests. We get some world-class athletes, as well as world-class athletes, footballers, and from the local area and from around the world as well. So we're quite unique in what we do. And today's guest is really, really fascinating. He's played football across different continents. We grew up playing football in Australia, and he's had a stint in the UK at youth level and been around Europe. And he's playing now in the American League, MLS, for Toronto, which is fascinating because we know Toronto in rugby league has entered the Super League. So we'll get a bit of a rundown on what Toronto is like too. So Caleb Patterson-Sewell, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jimmy. I appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on board. And let's sort of start from the beginning. I mean, at Toronto now, you're a goalkeeper there, and obviously interesting to see how things are out there. But let's start from the beginning. And where did it all begin for you, playing-wise?
Yeah, look, I grew up in Australia. I'm from Brisbane. Most people will know, but even a little bit further remote is a place called Gatton, which is a small kind of rural town. So to be honest, not much football going on out there as we know it, but more your rugby league and your cricket and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, just kind of stumbled into it with a few mates, and then just sort of kicked over, made some local teams, and then you made your regional team, and then made the state team, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're kind of in the thick of it. So can't say it was planned, but it worked out nonetheless.
Yeah, that's really interesting, you say, and it's interesting because, like you says, for our listeners who aren't quite sure how football works or soccer, as some people know in Australia, it's more popular in certain areas, and Queensland, I would have thought, would probably be more rugby league, and I'm not sure if the AFL's big. But was there anything specifically that sort of drew your attention to football, Caleb? Anything sort of caught your attention? Because obviously there's other sports that compete against football. Was there anything specific that sort of drew you towards it, or did you just...
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a few mates that were always playing. I was heavily into cricket, so I was playing in what was called an emerging players squad. It's basically where they tap you up for like the future Australian teams or your state teams, and they only select like a minimal number of players at each age group. And so I was doing that very heavily, and then at school we were always just playing school sport, and I'd choose a different sport other than cricket, and started playing soccer with my mates, and then just enjoyed it. And then one day a buddy of mine said, "Hey, listen, come stay the night at my house, but beforehand I've got to go to this tryout. It's for the local regional team. You should do it as well. It's free, and you can have a run around." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm not good enough for that sort of thing." And I just went there with him, and then basically struck out at every position other than goalkeeper. So it just became goalkeeper by default.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing that struck me about yourself, and having seen you train and play when you're in the UK, is that you are a good athlete. You got all the attributes to being a good athlete. Quick reflexes and good reaction time and explosive power as well. And how important do you think that is? Obviously, you got the attributes there, but no doubt you would have trained really hard. And how much training did you sort of put into to get to where you are, and in terms of your own training? Has it been a lot of hard work to get to the level that you're at, or was it something that sort of came naturally for you?
No, it definitely comes through hard work. I wouldn't say I'd be like one of those guys that was kind of just given this God-given talent of being an elite goalkeeper. It's definitely something, once I really got into it and realised, right, I can go somewhere here. Hours at home on the old rebounder back in the day, and it was just my mum took me for loads and loads of training just because she kind of realised being a goalkeeper required specialised training. It wasn't just sort of turn up to training twice a week and that'll be sufficient. Usually at a youth level there is no goalkeeper coach, so you're just kind of running around out there, and that was a specialised position. So again, there come a point there when I was probably about 13, 14, I'd say I was training about 4 or 5 times a week there, specifically for goalkeepers, and then go away and do your team training and all that sort of stuff. And then we got to another point where we realised if you want to take another step, you've got to try and get out of the area in which we were. And that's no disrespect to the area that I grew up in. It just was not an elite footballing environment. And if you're going to take it seriously and invest money and time, we need to make a move. So we went closer to Brisbane, and we moved to school there. I went to a school there for football, played at a local club that's now in the A-League in Australia, which is called the Brisbane Roar. And then my mum took me to England, and basically just, obviously when we were kids, we come across you there as well, and it was down at Bury there. So, it was just more trying to find a way to get in, trying to find an environment to improve. And I wouldn't say, to be fair, it definitely wasn't easy, but I was probably blessed a little bit that my mum actually took the time to kind of take me to those environments at a young age when most parents are probably, and understandably so, a little bit scared, like, okay, is this kind of investment in time going to be worth it? There's no guarantee you're going to be a footballer, right? So I think a lot of things aligned in a summary. A lot of things aligned, and they kind of worked out.
Yeah, and that's sort of interesting you say, and I think for me, I think that if there was ever anybody who deserved to play at the very highest level like you are doing now and have done, it's yourself, because you sort of showed that persistence and focus. And I recall your time in the UK. I think it was just unfortunate in the sense that different regulations and visas and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, as a youngster, all you want to do is play the game, and that was obvious to me. But there's rules and regulations out there, and they change, and I don't understand them very well myself sometimes. But to show that dedication, persistence, and certainly what struck me was your mum was a very strong character and really supported you in the sense that she really believed in you. And is that really important, do you think, Caleb, that you've got someone who really believes in your ability? I mean, how much of an influence was that on you to have someone who really backed your corner and thinks, you can do this, just keep going and the right chance will come up?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think when you're a kid, you probably don't really understand how important that is at that time. At some points, your parents can probably see a little bit further than you can, and they give you the push at the right time, or give you a stern word when it's needed. But I would definitely say, in my specific case, without having that kind of backing, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today. And again, I mean, it's so many no's when you're trying to find your way as a young guy, especially when you're not living in the UK. I didn't have a passport, so obviously couldn't stay there long term. But a lot of these guys get released from one club, and you can drive 10 minutes away, and all of a sudden, if you've come from a Premier League academy, someone else lower down will probably just take you up, but thinking, well, he could turn out to be a good League One player or whatever. Let's just take a chance on him here. But if being from Australia, we don't have that. So it's like you throw all your eggs in one basket, you turn up, and we still at that point had a stigma of, Australia isn't the greatest footballing country. Are they really that good? And so again, just having that, my mum probably heard more no's than I did in a sense when the coaches would say, listen, it's going to be too difficult, we can't sort out the visas, or, he's not good enough. So it was always just trying to, at that point, figure out where to from there. If you can't stay in England long term, I remember being at Liverpool and they sort of said, listen, he's done really well, but we can't keep him here after he's 18. He doesn't meet the requirements. And so at that point, it was a foreign country, and then where do you go? We don't speak the language. And so again, it was, all in all, without her sort of helping me navigate the ways, and then agents get involved, and 90% of agents are rubbish anyway. So again, it was just trying to navigate that, and she did as best she could. And look, it worked out, but it definitely was not easy, and it was a huge important piece to that, because at any time, the moment she pulled the pin or said, you know what, mate, this might not work out, I probably would have agreed with her at points,
and that sort of shows a lot of mental strength as well to keep going. And one thing that was evident was your ability. There was never any question mark. You had the ability, and obviously you still have the ability now. And I'm sure as long as you play, you'll keep producing the goods. But you had the ability, but sometimes having the ability, whether it's, I'm not a big believer in luck, but I think you need a break here or there. Sometimes we all need, something to go our way. Eventually, it seemed to me things sort of started to settle for you when you went to Portugal, and you started making big ways over there. People knew about you then. And tell us about your time in Portugal, Caleb. It was a really interesting time, and I looked at it from an outside looking in. I thought, this is fantastic. You seem to be really getting the credit you deserve, to be fair. And what was it like playing in Portugal?
Yeah, look, I'd say the first year, if you ask me that question, I'd say very scary, just because, again, an agent took me there. He had seen me play in the States and so on when I was at the Red Bulls, and I was young, and he sort of said, listen, we can bring you over and get you signed. And I came over and met with some clubs, and then I ended up signing with a club that I didn't meet with in the second division. I didn't speak a word of the language. Not a lot of people there were openly willing to speak English. They could speak it. I think it was more they were a little bit embarrassed to kind of make mistakes. Again, for my first year there, I lived in an area by the beach, which is probably hindsight the wrong place to go, but they all spoke English, so I didn't really have to speak Portuguese when I was away from the football club. But then it was one of those things where you really needed to show that you were better than what they've got for those guys to respect you, because Portugal, for those that might not know, it is really a massive footballing country in terms of where people go in order to kick on from there. I think it's one of the highest selling leagues in the world. I mean, and I'm talking about competing with your Spain and England and so on in terms of dollars for players. So again, it ended up being a very great spot. It was my first year. I played every game in the league. I was nominated for goalkeeper of the year for the league in a team that had just been promoted from the third division. So again, that was a point where I had Benfica, Porto, Sporting, all coming to take a look. And so as you start to read things in the paper, again, you don't want to buy into it too much, but I knew there was some interest there. And then from there, after that year, all these offers came, and I decided to stay in Lisbon, and close to Lisbon, and signed for a club called Setúbal. In the first league there, I signed 2 years there. And yeah, that was the start of really kicking on and playing against some big teams, if you will, your Benficas and Porto and Sporting and so on. So yeah, that's where it started there in Portugal. It was good.
That's amazing, experience. I can imagine, we know Portugal's produced some of the best players in the world, and they've produced, if not the best player at the moment, debatably, Ronaldo, Messi, and whichever, obviously both fantastic players. But one thing's for sure about Portugal, there's been no short of tradition in players, and there's been no short of coaches too. And what was the coaching experience like out there? I mean, a lot of coaches are highly respected that come from Portugal. There's some great managers in the UK who are from Portugal. What was the coaching like out there, Caleb, the coaches in Portugal?
Yeah, look, it's no shock that now, obviously, Mourinho was the first one to obviously really call some attention to the Portuguese guys, but they just turn them out one after another over there. I think, again, you're going to see more and more every year just show up, just because the way in which they go about it, it's very detailed. There's a lot of video analysis. There's a lot of, again, this whole thing about the methodology and having a coach that is responsible for looking after the ways in which you're going to implement your systems and so on. I mean, they really get into detail, even on their coach education side. Obviously, I want to go into coaching when I'm retired, so it's something that I take a keen interest in. And even for their first level, they've got to go through the local university there, and it takes them for like 2 to 3 years just to get your first level, whereas in Scotland and Ireland and the UK and so on, you don't have to do that. As long as you complete your hours, you'll get your first level. So I guess right from the get-go, they weed out the ones that are not really in it long term, just because they've got to invest a large time into what they're doing at a grassroots level. But they have some very good managers. My first manager that signed me there was João de Deus. He was, again, my manager at Gil Vicente in the Premier League. He re-signed me again there, but he's now with a very famous Portuguese manager, Jorge Jesus, who was the coach of Benfica. He was over in Saudi Arabia recently. He's won the UEFA Cup, and now he's down in Brazil, and they're at Flamengo. And they're top of the table, and he's his assistant manager there now. And then I had a few others throughout my time over there that are sort of older and more stern in their ways. But again, they're very detailed. Every one system and they stick to it. There's not really any flexibility in what they're willing to move on. It's just basically, we're going to set up our way, this is how we're going to play, and minimal work on what the opposition's going to do. It's more just sort of obviously show you that's their system, that's how they like to play, but then they quickly flip it around to, we're going to worry about us because we set up the right way, they're going to have to adapt kind of deal. So, very, very good managers, very long drawn out coach education specifically in that country. But yeah, it's something that I took a real keen interest in. I used to write the sessions down when I went home from training, just because I thought they were that good.
That's really interesting, and what I find interesting about that, Caleb, is that in the UK we look at Portugal, and if you look at Portugal, they, in my opinion, I think they've punched above their weight in the sense that you think of the population of the country, and you look at the investment that goes into some of the more traditional leagues. If you look at, say, maybe the Premier League, the Serie A, and that's not undermining Portuguese clubs. Obviously, Porto won a Champions League and they've got huge tradition. That's for sure. We look at the investment and like from a global perspective, the Premier League is such a huge package. But when you think of the likes of, say, Wolverhampton, the manager they had, Nuno, he did incredible things. And I've got to admit, Caleb, I was the first person when Wolverhampton had the manager, Nuno had gone there from Portugal, and they were in the Championship, and he started bringing in some of these younger Portuguese players. I thought, well, how's that going to work in the Championship? But I went and watched them a few times. I thought, wow, these guys are the real deal, And he had them playing, and what struck me, he was sort of so methodical. You've had like the likes of Quiroz coaching at United, Mourinho obviously as a manager, but the methods, and you could just sort of see the organisation and the shape of the team, and everyone knew what they were doing, and to the point now that obviously this season the Premier League has been a bit up and down, but there's nothing, no taking away what is achieved. But it seems to me you should have really embraced that. And from the point of view, obviously, you grew up in Queensland, and it's one of them where you move abroad, and I think sometimes for any young player moving to a different country, it's a different culture, different environment. Did you find yourself embracing the culture, Caleb? I think sometimes, in my opinion, certain players who move abroad, they don't embrace the culture, and that can be a struggle. I think that what you do seem to have done really, really well when you went out there was sort of embrace it and sort of get out there and get amongst it. Is that something that you sort of managed to do yourself?
Yeah, look, I think on the social aspect and a playing aspect, I think firstly, when you walk through the doors of a foreign club, you can't think that the ways that you've been involved in the game are going to be applicable in that country, in that environment. Portugal was completely different in anything I've been to, in the setup from, where you walk in the morning, how they go about your kit, to the whole bit. I mean, so in that sense, yes, you need to be open and embrace that. And I think, again, just going back to Nuno there, I played against his teams when he was at Real Ave, and I mean, he was a forward-thinking coach there, and hired a Scottish guy to go to Portugal that didn't speak any of the language, because he just realised that guy was brilliant at his job as a sports scientist. So again, no shock that Nuno again has been able to transition. But again, he as a coach was open-minded to how to get better. So sometimes I've seen some foreign boys come across, and on the playing side, what's all this about? What are we doing that for? And yada yada. But that's their way. You have to appreciate that and go with it. And then on the social aspect, the best way that I found to endear yourself to your teammates firstly is just get the job done, and then they'll take a liking to you. And then from there, you kind of open up the doors. But if you just sort of stay home, eat your own food, and don't get out of the house, you can't speak the language. And now, to be fair, I didn't speak anything for the first 18 months. And then after that, you slowly have to speak. You just either you don't, and you struggle, or you start to try and make some mistakes. And now I speak, I'd say, more or less fluently now from my time there. But again, the game there is a different beast. Some of the coaches are very closed-minded, but then you get some teams that are also, the club itself are very open-minded there in terms of from the sport directors and how they look at it. I know that Marco, who's at Everton now, I was playing for Atlético, and he was still a player at a place called Estoril, and they were in the last position with a Brazilian coach, and he wasn't really playing. And then they fired the coach, and they had like this interim period, and they just sort of said, you know what, let's go to Marco. He was the club captain. He's been there the longest. And then they knew he wanted to do into coaching, and they sort of said, listen, we'll just give you the interim role until we find someone. Well, he just didn't stop winning. He got him promoted. They went from last in the first 10 games, and by the end of the season, they were promoted. So again, while Portugal's in its ways, there are instances where, they do show that they're open-minded, and if you do embrace what they're doing, that'll go a long way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And, for any of our listeners, young players, and we've seen more and more players from the UK go abroad as well. Traditionally, a lot of young players from the UK would stay and not move, but we've seen the likes of Sancho in Germany, and we've seen players move on to further their careers in other leagues. And sometimes, if you're not getting the game time where you are, you've got to go to get game time. It's so important to get game time, because if you're not sort of getting the opportunities or playing, then it's obviously difficult to stay sharp. And there was a point in when you were playing in Portugal, Caleb, I thought, this is, in my opinion, I thought, well, there's a good chance you could get an international call-up. The reason being, I felt that, Australia has produced some great keepers. That's one thing's for sure. But I felt there was a transitional period where I thought, well, you probably entitled to an opportunity. I don't want to tell the coach how to do their job with the management. I'm sure they've got their own policy in terms of scouting network and what they do. But yourself, what were your thoughts in terms of international call-up? Was that something that you sort of felt that was an option at a point, particularly in Portugal, when you're playing really, really well and playing for some of the greatest clubs in the world?
It's an interesting question. That's probably a point in my career where it brings back probably a little bit of, I would say hostility or whatnot, but I was literally 2 weeks away from an international call-up. They'd flown out from Australia. They brought the goalkeeper coach out to watch me play against Benfica. And that day we had a guy sent off after 5 minutes, and we got beaten. But after the match, they met with me, the club, my agent, and so on. The goalkeeper coach said, we're really, really impressed, and we're going to call him in for the game against Romania, and the game would be in Spain. And that was basically 2 weeks away. And Ange's policy, Ange Postecoglou at the time was the manager, his policy was, if you're playing, you're in with a shot. If you're sitting as a number two, no matter the size of the club, if somebody else is doing the business on a weekly basis, I'm just going to call them. And so that basically set the tone for the national team program at that point. Get yourself playing. And so everything was good. The first game of the season, I was man of the match. That game, obviously, was a bit tricky. We got beat, but after that, the manager in Portugal signed a lad on a Friday, and then Saturday he turned up and the guy played.
Wow.
So it was really one of those where he didn't come in and even fight for a spot at that point, and that's nothing to do with the goalkeeper. I actually get along with him really well. He's a fantastic guy, but it was just one of those where out of nowhere you're literally going to the national team in a couple of weeks, and then just like that, with a click of the fingers, you're gone. So I thought, well, he must have blamed me for the result against Benfica or whatnot. I just thought I had a good game, but long story short, just in those 2 weeks there, that guy played, and I think they ended up having the same manager, agent at the time. So they didn't call me in, which was just devastating, because I was literally right there. And that at 24, that's how old I was then. Just getting a national team call-up, that changes your market value, that changes how many clubs are going to come and watch you play. It really does change a lot of things. So that's a long-winded answer, but it was very close when I thought I was in a really good position to go, even to the point where later on for the next 2 years, the goalkeeper coach, Tony Franken, super nice guy, always sent text messages, let me know how you're going, can we help you get a move, can we get you to where you're playing, if you're playing, you've got an opportunity, you're on our radar, we haven't forgot about you, yada yada. But the policy was to play. So while that was a policy for everybody, that was fair game, and there's definitely no jumping up and down about, give me a shot here or there. It was, mate, you've got to play. And just at that particular time, it didn't happen. Then I got my spot back, and I thought I'd get called in, and then after I lost one more game, I got the bench again. So it was just one of those where I couldn't win with the manager at the time, so you just have to recognise that, bite your tongue, and keep it moving.
Yeah, it's one of them. I think that, sometimes things are meant to be, Caleb, and, your career's been fantastic, and, long may it continue. And I think that, you never say never in life, who knows, but I certainly thought at that point you had a great shout, as good as anybody, and I think that, certainly Australia has produced some great keepers and some good keepers at the moment. But in saying that, you're in there, and one thing's for sure, once you're in there, it's going to be hard to take that shirt back off you, because you got the ability and you think, well, you're on the way. But some things, it's one of them. It goes back to what we said earlier, you just need that break here or there. But it didn't stop, it didn't deter you from sort of carrying on and playing in one of the great leagues of Europe and the world, and that was a great thing. And that eventually would lead to a move to the States. Is that would you go to the States after Portugal? Was that yeah?
Exactly. So I kind of just, I met my wife there in Portugal. She's Brazilian, and then we had our little fella coming along. So we just were kind of one of those where, do we stay in Portugal or do we come back to the States? And at that time, I turned a few offers down, and we decided to come back to the States and try and go the MLS route. And they've got some strange rules here where a team basically could control my future within the MLS, even though I hadn't played in the MLS for, at that point, 8 years. So what they do in this league is they can ask for a trade of whatever they want, basically. And if the teams that are interested do not trade you, if they don't trade you for what that club wants, basically you can't play in the league. So when I came back, we had some offers, but the trade values didn't match up. So at that point, I went to the second league here, which was a little bit different. And when I went to the second league, I realized quickly that I'd like to get back to something a little bit more professional, if that's just being nicely put. So then I went back to Portugal. I went back there again to a club called Farense, and then out of nowhere, we had an offer from the States that basically said, listen, you can come here and play, and then we can help you go back to the MLS. We can help arrange that and do a deal, because I was coming from the second league at that point to the Premier League, so you can get around it. So we came back. We went to a place called Jacksonville, right on the beach in Florida. Lovely place. English manager, who's a young guy. He's about 33 now. His name's Mark Lowry. Very good manager for his age, and I'd say a lot of people in England probably have no idea who he is, but he's definitely a guy that one day will pop up somewhere, and people will think, oh geez, that's strange, where'd he come from? But he was very good. From there, I signed a 2-year contract at Toronto here in the MLS. In the first year, we were in the Champions League, which is basically where you play against all the Mexican teams and the Central American teams. No MLS team has ever won that Champions League. And we went to the final and lost on penalties. So that was a shame. And here we are in my second year. We just won the semi-final last night against Atlanta, down in Atlanta. And now we'll move on to the final on next Sunday against Seattle. So all that to say, it's been a pretty enjoyable ride so far here in Toronto.
Yeah, that's tremendous, and you know what's quite interesting in terms of what level. I know we spoke about it off air, and I'm sure our listeners will be interested to know what your thoughts are. You're someone who's been there, done that. I mean, in my experience of being out in the States, and I went and watched an MLS game the last time I was out there, and I thought the levels improved immensely. I think it really has come along leaps and bounds, and that's a reflection of when we see European clubs tour there. Albeit it's hard to get a barometer, because at end of season tours you just don't quite know. But one thing's for sure, what has improved is the technical side. I mean, physically, it's always a given. The American teams are going to be great physically. They've got great facilities, and they've got a great work ethic. But where would you say, from a European perspective, Caleb, where would you say the American League would sort of fit in? I know it's hard to compare like for like, but what would you say as a barometer, roughly speaking?
Yeah, I would say you've got some teams here that the top teams here definitely could compete, I would say, in the Premier League. Some people might laugh at that, but it's It's the truth. And then as a whole, you're going to be ranging, I would say, between sort of like your top teams or a mid-level Premier League team down to your championship level teams. And again, the setups here are as professional as you get. I mean, teams are investing 10, 15, $20 million in training grounds. So it's not as if, the league is this retirement league that it's always kind of had that image abroad, like, oh, you just go to America for one last payday. Nowadays, it is really hard for older players to come over and perform. I think you've seen when Frank came over here.
Absolutely.
And even to an extent, Ashley Cole, when he came over. You're trying to pick and choose. I guess if I'm a club, I'm looking at, Ibrahimovic, he comes over and he does score goals and he does bring you name value, so he's probably worth it, and he's selling tickets, but he's actually performing. They've got Carlos Vela here right now, the Mexican international that was, obviously a big name player. He's doing the business, but now they're starting to change the way in which they do their recruitment. So it's not so much just looking for free transfer, old guys who've got some name value, bring them over, and away you go. I know Toronto specifically went for Americans that were in Europe, so they got Josie Altidore, Michael Bradley, and brought them over to kind of change the face of this team specifically. But now you're looking around the league, and teams we just bought a lad for $10 million in the last window. In a transfer fee, you've got Atlanta's just paid $17 million for a South American guy as well. So they are now starting to spend money, but the money in which that they're spending in transfers are usually on these South American guys that they can have times on your side. You can bring them in, let them play. If they perform like Almiron did when he's going to Newcastle now, they sell him on and then they'll make their money back. So again, the league's changing. Another couple of collective bargaining agreements. Obviously that's just between the players union and the league to try and fight to get rid of some of these stupid rules that they've got here that can only just be chalked up to being an American thing, nothing else, because they don't exist anywhere else in the world. But once they can get through some of that, and now the new TV deals and so on, every team now is required to have a football-specific stadium. And if you're playing in one that's not, it's because you're just there temporarily until yours is getting built. So again, the league is no longer what it was when I was first in the league back in 2008. It's much better. It's much more professional. And again, I would definitely say it's basically in terms of setup, they're all Premier League type setups around the league now.
Yeah, I mean, we get the on one of the TV stations here. They show the MLS, and I watch it now and again. But also, being there firsthand, last year I went to watch New York versus LA, and I thought the atmosphere was fantastic. It was really, really good. And I think that one thing the Americans do really well is put on a show, and you had like entertainment before the game, and it was really, 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 really good. And I think that it was really the atmosphere for me was had a real European feel to it, in the sense that you could have been in one of the traditional European clubs. It was really, really good buzz. I thought they got behind the team, and Ibrahimovic played for LA, and I thought that as much as he played well, I thought that they did a good, they marked him pretty well, and they looked like they knew what they were doing, and that's for sure. And for me, what I find interesting, Caleb, is from a perspective of, say, and maybe your thoughts will be interesting on this, but I think in terms of America as a national team, and for me, I felt that at one point I sort of expected them to sort of kick on and sort of move on, and I don't think they've sort of moved on as fast as people thought they would do. And what are your thoughts on the American national team from your own perspective, and is that something that sort of you think that is progressing, or where do you think they stand at the moment from a national perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a big debate constantly. It's a 24/7 thing here in the States of how can they get that, with all the money that they've got here in the game and so on, the Americans basically expect that all of a sudden that they can be competing with your top teams in the world. Now, the real football guy understands that, just because you've got money doesn't mean you're going to compete. Yeah. And so we are now just got a new manager for the national team here for the States, and his way of playing is very much based off of your Guardiola type type style, playing out of the back at all times and playing through teams rather than just sort of, traditionally Americans would play it long, play for the second balls, and you've got your quick fingers, big boys in the box, and away you go. So, but now he's brought in this style that worked for him in the MLS. He used to be a national team player, never been an international manager. They're struggling right now. The truth is that national team, the other night I was at the game when they played Canada, and we got lads from our team on both sides, and Canada just absolutely played them off the park.
Wow.
And if you go down and you look at the names and you look at, no disrespect to Canada, but what's the American team worth compared to what the Canadians are worth, probably night and day. But in terms of performance, America is trying to play this way that I think, and no disrespect to the lads that are in there, but sometimes the players you've got dictates the way that you need to play. It's all well and good to want to go and play out of the back and play through teams and dictate that way, but if you are not technically savvy or good enough to do that and play through those teams, you simply cannot do it because you're out, at the end of the day, you're going to play yourself into dangerous situations in front of your own goal. You're going to get punished, and that's what's happening right now. Now that's the state of where they're at the moment, but I actually think it comes much earlier. If you go back to similar to Australia right now, if you go back to the golden generation of Australia when you've got your Vidukas, your Kules, your Bosnich and Schwartzes and all these guys, we can name the Grellas and the whole bunch that we were churning them out, that were going to Europe and holding their own in top leagues. America had the same thing with your Friedel, Keller, you had to an extent Landon, you had McBride at Fulham, guys that went abroad to Germany and so on and were really like big players in the squads. Now we are to a point where we have players that go abroad, but I don't think that they're doing the business like those guys are doing, and I think it comes from the youth development and basically the kinds of training that we are doing at a grassroots level here in the States. I really think that right now we need to take a good look at the kind of environments that we're giving the kids. Now, it's a pay-to-play system here, which is fine if that's how they want to do it. That's not a problem. And a lot of people in my opinion, get caught up in this, the kids are having to pay. Right, okay, no problem. But at the end of the day, if you're paying for it, you need to make sure that this coach education, what these kids are getting at grassroots level, are going to be decent. And I own an academy in Tennessee, and I'm not to say we're the best. We just do training for kids, and that's it. We don't do games or anything like that, because I feel as though the youth training in the States is very poor. We got this kind of there's no nice way to say it. I feel as though the average youth coach thinks he's got it figured out. He watches Guardiola on a weekend and says, I can go and put on a session, I've got it all. See, I know how they play out from the back. They do that, and that, but they don't have the full understanding of developing a player and getting them better versus just winning your U10 tournament on a weekend. So I think that the program will struggle so long as all of our kids at the grassroots level are not really getting this kind of unified quality kind of coaching. And how do you do that? Don't ask me. I think it's that in itself is difficult, but it's similar back home in Australia as well, where we're not really producing players, we're not really performing at U17, U20, U23 World Cups and those things. So it's kind of a snowball effect for me.
It's interesting you say, and for someone who's had the experience that you've had, I think that's a really invaluable insight, because it's from the outside looking in, a lot of people will think, well, what's going on? And I echo the sentiments that you've shared there. I think that Australia's got a similar problem at the moment, from what I see. I mean, there's people better placed than me to comment on that, but in my experience and my involvement in the game in different parts of the world, and from a consultancy point of view, I see that. And I think that in England at the moment, one thing they have got right now is they are investing more at grassroots football. They are getting younger players training better. We've seen that now in competitions, in tournaments. They're winning tournaments. My only concern for England would be that whether these players are going to get the opportunity to play first team football and obviously keep developing their skills, because you can win a tournament under 21s, under 20s or under 17s, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go on and be, unless you get the game time. But one thing that's on a positive note, we've seen the likes of Chelsea this season, who's had transfer embargoes. We've seen these players come through, and they've got the ability, they've got the talent. You've got some really, really talented players. And I think for me, in one sense, over here, the semi-final of the World Cup was almost like a false dichotomy. That's not undermining. I've got a lot of friends here, professional people. I work here, but I felt that what it didn't illustrate that there's still a long way to go. I mean, the game against Croatia, for example, that England played, technically they outplayed for me, and I think there's a lot of work to do. And yeah, I completely agree. Grassroots level is really important, I think. But even when you get that right, you've got to make sure the players have got a pathway to go into a first team level, and that's huge for me. That's quite really interesting. I mean, in the States, traditionally they've had, the universities have provided a really, really good level of competition in all sports. How does that work from your experience? And obviously your experience there is professional, Caleb, but from your experience in terms of where do the players go once they've sort of graduated from the youth level? Is there a pathway for them into MLS or?
Again now, so traditionally all sports in the States where you go from high school, you get recruited to a college, you go on to college, and then you get to what they have, the draft over here. They take their best players from the college system, and then they obviously put them on contracts at clubs. But now you'll see here shortly in soccer football, I believe the draft will go away within the next 2 years. I think that'll be redundant because college soccer now is becoming very redundant because now they're investing in their academies. So MLS teams are going out, starting out. I think we just added here in Toronto an under 10 team right now, which is the youngest they've ever had. So a mate of mine just used to be a player, just returned to the club to coach them. So I think they go out now and they see value in just getting their own coaches to develop the kids, because a lot of the college guys that were coming out are very physically gifted, tactically very poor, technically very poor. So you were basically just getting a glorified athlete coming out, and you would get a sprinkling of decent football players here and there. Obviously, years and years ago it was better, but more recent, the last 5-6 years, I wouldn't say that you're getting any top-class world beaters. So I think what they've decided now is we go out, we get them ourselves, we keep them at home, we keep them local, we invest in them. They can still go to college. So if they want to go to college, they can still go to college. And then when they want to leave college, if they've been developed by, let's say in this case, Toronto has first right of refusal on that player because they've invested the money to develop him through the academy system. Now, at that point, if Toronto doesn't want the player, then he's free game to go wherever he wants. So it is changing. They are investing, but again, that's going to be for your, 30 teams that we're going to have in the league soon. So that'll be for 30 clubs. And outside of those 30 clubs, you've got the rest of the footballing world who doesn't have that structure and that setup. So the same question is still said about where to for those kids. Where do those guys go that might not, get the opportunity or don't live near an MLS club, because you can't take kids that live too far away. It's against the rules. So again, if you're from Toronto but you're going to live in LA, you're not allowed to do that unless your whole family moves out there. So again, it is improving, but there are some things that need to be worked through for the pathway and how they come up. But now, basically, most of these teams are creating what they call like a B team, similar to what they have in Spain. So they will take these teams and put them in the second or third division in America, and then just let their young lads that are usually about 16 to 21 go and get games on a weekend in a so-called, it's a professional environment. In the second division is very good. Third division is, it's its first year this year, so it needs a little bit more time. But there are pathways there for the MLS clubs, but specifically for kids that are coming out of college, it's a slippery slope, because if you don't catch on straight away, it's very hard to get someone to open the door for you after you've been out of the game for a year or so.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I'm sure the listeners will be, really fascinated by that. I mean, obviously someone who's out there at the moment and living it, it's one of the greatest ways to get understanding of sort of what goes on, and that's really fascinating for me. I think one thing that strikes me, Caleb, is the athletes that America can produce. We've seen some great athletes in basketball, in baseball, in many different sports. I mean, many years ago, I'm sort of going to ask you about your academy. I mean, many years ago when I was doing some coaching, I've been to America a lot of times, but many years ago I was doing some coaching out there for this organisation, and we were sort of travelling America. One of the places I did travel to was in Nashville, and I had such a great time in Nashville. The people were fantastic and friendly, and there was a real buzz about the place and the actual city itself. And they took me to watch a team. I don't know if they're still around, the team, but the family that I was sort of staying with at the time, they were supporters of, I think it was the Nashville Metro Stars. I think
It was.
Yeah. It was an amazing experience. It really was, and just the whole place. But your academy, how's that getting on? I mean, that must be a buzz for you. I mean, how's things going on for the academy? Is it still going? Is it?
Yeah. We're up to 4 locations around the city. So the idea was basically when I first started, I started with a mate of mine. I helped him get a job as a coach at the Red Bulls in their academy program, and then I said, if you ever come back to Nashville, just promise me we'll open an academy and you'll run it for me while I'm not there. So true to his word, that's exactly what we did. So we literally just started with a bag of balls and cones, and I think Brad Friedel, he set up an academy in Ohio, and he dumped a lot of money into it, over $5-6 million, and he went bankrupt from it just because he invested all this money. He brought out his goalkeeper coach, a massage therapist from the UK, the whole bit. They brought them all out, and their idea was to get players and sell them back to Europe and make their money, and that just with all the rules surrounding kids moving abroad, it was never going to work. So I just sort of said, I'm going to do the opposite. We're going to get a bag of ball cones and a decent session, and we're just going to make it all technical work, just because, like you said, we're here in the States, they're physically very gifted. They're taught from a young age just to sling weights around from high school level and so on. So they're all athletic, but technically poor. So I thought that is our niche. That's where we need to focus to help the kids, and that's give them quality technical programs. So that's what we started that way. And we slowly grew it in one location. We started doing one camp in the summer where I was able to fly back, and then I would bring my mates that played professional or ex-pros. The last couple of years we brought the technical director from Benfica, from their academy, which is I'd say a top 5 academy in the world easily. And I think some of the kids don't really understand what they're getting at the camp sometimes in terms of those coaches that are coming over that are doing this for a living. But my idea is to try and improve the level of play where I call home right now. So basically, I think the best way to do that is just to use my contacts to bring in the best coaches we can bring in during that week or during that time. Absolutely. And let them experience what these sessions are like. And just because you're not a fantastic player does not mean you should not experience that. So basically, what we do is we had just under 300 kids this year for the camp in the summer. Now that's the biggest one in the state. And we said everyone's eligible to come, U7 to U17, and we're just going to split you up via talent level. And then we just rotate the kids around so that way they get to experience all the coaches, whether it's a pro player, an ex-pro, a current coach from Europe and so on. They're actually rubbing shoulders with guys that have been there, seen it and done it, and not leaving anything to chance. Again, they go to club level, they get their trainings there, but when they all leave, usually they're all saying, hey, this is by far and away the best week of soccer we've ever had in terms of knowledge and so on. So that was kind of my aim going into it. I think a lot of people talk about grassroots level and what should be done and how it should be done. I think the only way to really do that is to get your hands dirty and get out there and actually participate. Doesn't mean you're always right. Just means you're just trying to make a difference rather than just running our mouths as players. Sometimes we can do that a bit too much.
Absolutely, great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's mate, I love it. It allows me to get into coaching. I've been doing it for I guess we're at 5 years now. And yeah, it's more than a hobby now. It's more of a proper business, and we've got people working there and so on. But
fantastic.
I I love it. And I won't do any more until I retire. I'll leave it as it is, just because it literally is too much work to do while you're playing. But it's very good. But more than anything, just getting out there with the kids and having a chat and just trying to be a role model and give them some good coaching. And it's been fun. It's been great.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting stuff, and I think it's a great sentiment to have. And I think that above all else, people talk about grassroots football. For me, it's about enjoyment as well. It's just get out there and enjoy the game, and that's a big thing. And one thing sometimes I think when it gets a bit too, I think it's great having a development program. It's all fantastic, but giving the experience is amazing. To have the experience to sort of train like a professional would do is an amazing experience, but not have that sort of pressure to think, well, I have to make it as a player. It's hard to make it as a player. I mean, you've been very, kind enough to share your journey, and it's not easy to be a pro player. It takes there's a lot of variables that influence a person making it to the top, but that's a great thing they can do is to experience that. One thing that I was something that cross codes briefly in the UK, as you know, rugby league is only played in certain areas. In this area here, Salford, they had a good season. They made the Rugby Super League final against all odds and with a small budget, and they played St Helens, who were a little bit too strong, but they did really well to get there. But one team that's going to be entering the Super League is Toronto. I don't know how that's going to work out. It's fascinating, but I mean, I've been to Toronto. It's a fantastic city. I really enjoyed being out there. But what can people expect who make the journey out there to watch the rugby league at some point? No doubt they'll have to go up there and sort of the fans to watch it. What can they expect of the city? I mean, you've been there now, Caleb. I thought it was a buzzing place, and what a great experience for the game to expand rugby league. Yeah.
To be fair, when I first came, I didn't even know they had a team here. And so at the end of last year, I realised, what's this? They have a team, and then I realised they had a bunch of Australian guys and English guys all mixed in, and it looks as though they were kind of doing 3 months here, or at least a couple of weeks 8 weeks or so in a row, and then they would go back to England and stay there and be based over there for a couple of weeks. So, and then as this year got on, they went to the final and got promoted. So
that's right. Yeah.
And the location in which they're playing at is basically right downtown, small little stadium. Definitely nothing like what we have back in the NRL back home, where it's kind of your bigger stadiums is a big deal. And these guys are playing on synthetic AstroTurf, which I don't think there's one of those fields back in Australia in the NRL. So again, I've heard that the owner's got real deep pockets, and he basically was paying for all the clubs in England to come over. So if they were going to go into the league, he had to commit to flying out these clubs from the UK to get them over here. So he did it, and he said he wanted to get into the Super League. And I was just reading some articles the other week. Once they won it, a lot of Aussie guys over here, I think a couple of them have been out to our games as well. And I haven't been able to get out to a game yet, but they got some traction. I think that the stadium was full for the size the last game, and I expect now that they're in the Premier League that the marketing will really start to kick in around the city, and that next year everybody will know what's going on. And I was trying to have a chat with some of the boys about it, but most of the lads don't follow the rugby league or understand it too much. And I was trying to tell them, I said, do you know anything about this? And a lot of them are like, no, what's all that? So here I am trying to explain to some of the local guys what's going on. And even me, I don't have a full grasp of it, but I'm not naive though to where I understand it's a big deal that they've got promoted to what is probably one of the best leagues in the world. I'd say it's on par with the NRL.
Yeah, that's getting there for sure.
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating, and it's great to hear your perspective on it, Caleb. It really is, because it's. I mean, I was listening to another radio show, and they were talking about it, and I was really fascinated. And I've spoken to people at the clubs and from a radio perspective, and it's fascinating for me. I mean, obviously the travel is going to be a big thing, and I don't think they've worked out the logistics just yet. But fair play, and they've been promoted, and we'll see what happens. And I think that I would say it was a big step when London joined the Super Super League, but now Toronto, anything outside the northwest around this region, that sort of M62 corridor in rugby league is probably a big thing. But like you said, as the Super League now has come along in leaps and bounds, and we're seeing it progress all the time. But we watch this space. I'm sure the fans will enjoy it. It's a change for them, and to get out there and experience the city.
I think it's a smart city to have a go if you're going to do something different, just because in Canada there's so many expats over here. A lot of Australians here in Toronto, a lot of British people over here as well. So definitely, I think if you're going to do it anywhere on this side, I mean, Toronto's a pretty safe bet, just because, you still have people that have an understanding of the game. If you get down in the south, in the States somewhere, no chance. They've got no idea.
Exactly,
But here, you definitely, I know that when they won, I started to see a lot of their jerseys around on my drive-in. I live downtown, but we train about 45 minutes from downtown. And on the way to work every day, obviously, I would see some of these jerseys popping up over the streets, and I thought, that's pretty cool. People are starting to get behind it. So, I think it's one of those, like you said, watch this space, and, if they can get a couple big-name players over here as well, which I'm sure they will do to be competitive, he'll get the fans. He'll get the fans at some point, I'm sure.
That's fascinating. And one question I ask all the athletes and footballers and sports people who come on board the show is the toughest competitor they've played against. Caleb, I know that you've played against a lot of great people, footballers over the years. And is there someone that sort of strikes you as being a player you've come up against? Who would you say was being the toughest competitor you've played against?
I've got two there that I would say, in terms of just being an absolute animal on the field, and as a goalkeeper you're hitting goal kicks and you've just been told, steer it away from him, was Matic. I mean, this guy, for the size that he is incredible. The way he can get around, the way he can win balls in the air. Probably got to see a little bit more so of that in Portugal, just because he was a giant. But in England, the game's a little bit more physical, right? So, but he was a guy on the field that he'd just show up everywhere, and you think, how did he get there? So he was in terms of a guy that kind of stuck out as just doing his job. He was very good. In terms of talent, I would say either Paulo Aimar or Quaresma. And Quaresma was just on the ball. He was playing for Porto, and on the ball he was just incredible. I mean, the guy just stuck to his foot like glue. And I think when you kind of have that talent, I think part of that, you are just born with that to an extent.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can train some of that stuff, absolutely, but he's just got a real proper God-given talent, and you just see it, and you're just in awe. You're like, hats off to you, mate. You are the real deal. So, those would be a couple that would stand out to me for sure.
Absolutely. No, it's just really fascinating. And it's been very kind of you to join us, Caleb. It's been fantastic speaking to you, and the times have sort of got the best of us, and I can't believe how quick the show's gone. But I really want to thank you for coming on board. I mean, the listeners, no doubt, will be absolutely fascinated to hear your experiences, and I certainly was great to catch up with you again, and fantastic to see your career's going well, and long may it continue. So thanks again, Caleb, for coming on board the show. It's been fantastic.
Anytime, Jimmy. Thanks for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, all the best. So you've been listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi. It's been a fantastic show. Caleb's been kind enough to share his amazing experiences. And I can tell you now, from a keeper point of view, he's amongst some of the best keepers I've seen, certainly. And I've been very fortunate. I've seen many good keepers in my time as a coach. And we wish him every success. And what a fascinating insight into the world of playing in different countries. What a great insight. So until next week, join us on 94.4, same time, same place. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll speak to you then.